With the recent rise in criticism towards Like a Dragon Gaiden's combat, and the fact that I've gone back to my character action roots, and then of course there are completely separate categories for individuals trying to do no damage runs, and ones trying to do classic stylish gameplay inspired by Goliaths like DMC and Bayonetta. Well, lately there's been this idea that RGG has been stagnating in their beat-em-up gameplay development, with Ishin Kiwami and Gaiden supposedly being subpar when compared to Lost Judgment specifically. Well, there is an argument to be made there, particularly with Ishin Kiwami. This has retroactively led to a vocal portion of the community seeing Lost Judgment as this untouchable entity bereft of any flaws. And let me be the guy to say that, no, Lost Judgment isn't even close to being perfect. I could go on about how Boxer is a mere proof of concept that doesn't justify its existence, how Snake is wasted on Yagami when Tiger and the improved Crane cover more than enough ground on their own, or how having 4 combat styles you can only cycle through via a single button defeats the whole purpose of having a genuinely stylish, non-linear combat approach in a game. But the point of this detour isn't to say that Lost Judgment's combat is supposedly bad, because it's not. It's phenomenal, and it should be seen as a grand accomplishment by RGG, but it's far from truly being perfect, and critiquing the other games for not playing like this one does isn't going to improve the franchise moving forward. The fact that a multi-style setup worked for Lost Judgment or Yakuza 0 and resulted in near universal acclaim doesn't mean that it would be a perfect fit for every single game in the franchise. And even if it was, you'd eventually reach a point where adding countless new fighting styles with each new game would gradually result in more and more moves being carried over from the older games, thus damaging the uniqueness of the newer combat systems. You'll notice how the focus of the video has suddenly shifted from talking about quote-unquote the best combat system to discussing how or if the series could even improve on the best system that was crafted thus far. What if RGG had already peaked? Does this mean we'll need to retroactively Kiwamify every past game until they play like Zero or Lost Judgment? Obviously no. What is more important is to put personal preferences aside for the time, and again, look at a given combat system within the context of the game it is bound to. Take for example Yakuza 5. While it may have issues with the frequency of enemy encounters, the movesets themselves are deliberately designed around the characters that use them for the encounters they partake in. And yet, if you compare said movesets to their predecessors in Yakuza 4, you'll notice that each of them has evolved, sometimes for the better and other times for the worse. But ultimately, it is thanks to these evolutions and changes that the combat systems have gradually improved over the years, regardless of how long it may have taken to reach a universally accepted peak of sorts. There may come a day when someone documents all of the frame data, damage output, and hit properties for every single move in every single Yakuza game, in an attempt to see which combat system is truly the best. But even then, this concrete data wouldn't make that combat system perfect, nor would it dissuade fans from preferring one system over another. While it may be interesting to ponder what an older game could look like if it featured more modern design philosophies, I can wholeheartedly say that every single game in this franchise had the exact combat system that it needed. For it to achieve its inherent goals, and changing them would contradict the role and value a given game had in reaching the point where we currently are. There was a point in time where a game like Yakuza 2 was seen as the genuine peak of RGG's combat philosophy. But if the series kept playing it safe and simply copied it, we never would have gotten the multiple protagonists of Yakuza 4. If games like Ishin and Yakuza 0 didn't try offering multiple fighting styles to a singular character, we would have wound up with more and more protagonists being thrown in instead. In a desire for the games to keep feeling bigger and bigger, I believe that there is no such thing as the best Yakuza combat system.
Time out. Y'all know, hold on, wait. Y'all know.
At least not at this point in time. But if we want to collectively reach a point where such a system may come to be, we need to stop lifting certain games up on a pedestal and analyze each game for what it is and what it needs to be. Which ultimately brings us to Like a Dragon Gaiden. As if my thoughts on Lost Judgment haven't resulted in enough vitriol, I'll go out of my way to state another divisive take. Gaiden was a necessary improvement on the previous combat systems. I've seen journalists call this game disappointing, and a step back because it only had two fighting styles. For a system with multiple styles to work, the styles themselves need to be deliberately designed to benefit one another. Because if you have one style that can effectively do everything, it will make the rest of the toolkit feel like bloat. There were some valid points being raised about the downsides of Gaiden's combat, like the process of acquiring moves requiring dual currencies, or how the heat actions are a tertiary tool now that EX heat is the preferred climax to your heat gauge filling up. And while the first issue could easily be alleviated if RGG finally made a New Game Plus patch for the game, the second one actually feels like RGG is looking to bring this franchise's combat to levels we never would have anticipated before. Bear with me, I swear that this is relevant. There's a particular Sega IP that is deservedly listed as one of the best character action games to date, that being a personal favorite of mine, Bayonetta. The focal point of character action games is the stylish combat. And in trying to improve it from game to game, certain game mechanics need to be omitted or transformed. To explain this example in Yakuza terms, imagine that the glowing orbs beneath the health gauge functioned like a heat gauge of sorts. Once you fill it up, you can use it to execute something called a torture attack, or in the case of Yakuza terminology, something akin to our beloved heat actions. However, the way this gauge functioned has drastically changed in the second game, where it now also allowed you to go into Umbran Climax, which you might as well envision as extreme heat mode. This change received significant praise with time, even though many style players, myself included, going back to Gaiden, while it may feel like RGG is taking a step back from what they'd previously achieved, the end result is actually a step forward, one which shows their desire to keep building and keep improving their systems for the future. Creating a complex style like Agent, increasing the number of enemies in an encounter, or shortening the airtime of airborne enemies to reduce juggle spamming, all of these are decisions that can and will be divisive in the community. Personally, I adore them, even though many style players, myself included. Now, in theory, I could have done a very detailed overview of everything Gaiden's combat had to offer. If I could just demand any type of game imaginable, I'd want to see RGG tackle a character action game. A true character action entry, rather than an action RPG that takes occasional inference from DMC, which people infuriatingly mistake for actual character action these days. Anyway, back to the point, I'd want a game with a proper mission-based structure, cheeky interactions, a style meter, combat that incentivizes creativity, etc. Discussing one of this game's biggest highlights, the combat. So, you know how normally when you have a Yakuza game with two styles, one of them will be intended for single enemies and the other for group encounters? Well, that was the case with the Yakuza and Agent styles in Gaiden as well. So you'd think a similar premise would be reprised here, but in reality, Pirate Yakuza instead feels like a clash of OG Judgment's and Lost Judgment's philosophies in terms of style utility. Imagine if you took the Tiger style from the first game, i.e. something that was amazing in both group and boss encounters, and then you added the Crane style from Lost Judgment as the second one, being the style that truly shined at crowd control in a league of its own. Well, that's what wielding Pirate Yakuza's new styles felt like. Starting with Mad Dog, it effectively takes the best aspects of Thug style from Yakuza 0 and embellishes them with the classic Mad Dog moveset. With the only thing missing being the so-called frenzy state you'd enter post a finisher in Zero's iteration. To be more specific, Mad Dog's square combo in Pirate Yakuza functions as a Thug-style rush combo in Zero would, whereas mashing triangle here will result in a conventional Mad Dog-style combo from Zero. Given that triangle can also be used as a finisher, this means that we finally have a true hybrid style at our disposal, and between its 5 different rush combo iterations, Mad Dog in this game quickly reached the upper echelon of my favorite fighting styles in Yakuza. Other oddities unique to it include an easy launcher while holding square, a great offensive tool with absurd range in the form of jump, the classic tornado move used by holding circle, and a very interesting design choice heralded by the doppelganger mechanic. what I presume was used as a way to prevent repeating the standard EX heat spam that overcame the Judgment games and the first Gaiden. Pirate Yakuza saw it fit to limit your heat gauge, but also implement an extra gauge so you wouldn't feel underpowered by comparison. The Madness gauge fills as you dispatch enemies, basically being a blend of Yakuza 5's special states like Dragon Spirit and the Climax heat mechanic from that game. That is to say, Pirate Yakuza wants you to focus on fundamentals, and only rewards you with truly powerful tech once you've genuinely earned it. Between this and the more deliberate juggle timing a la the one from Gaiden, this is exactly the course correction that Yakuza's combat needed.
Anyways, if you don't know how to take a business to the next level, come see us with this ultra-thin light bar.
Cause even in the more recent games that had a ton of fun tech, the vast majority of the community always defaulted to launching and relaunching the enemies ad nauseum.
Even though many style players, myself included,
Now, even if you do decide to perpetually spam the newly introduced jump mechanic and this game's juggle iteration, you will still need to be more proactive overall. Keeping an enemy suspended won't keep you out of harm's way for too long, and with the increased enemy numbers and aggression present, the experience this game offers will likely make you a much better player, with a broader perspective on creative combat that will also apply to the older games of the series. I haven't even mentioned the other style in the game yet, which honestly reminds me of the dual sword style from Kenzan at its core. That alone would already be an amazing choice for crowd control, but the thing that really makes this one stand out are the cues that the new style takes from Agent in Gaiden. With Sea Dog, you will also have access to situational tools. In this case, a pistol for great long-range damage, a hook that functions as an inversion of Gaiden's spider gadget, this time drawing your character towards an enemy. And if the hook's mechanics didn't remind you of Devil May Cry already, with that game's Devilbringer utility, then the fact that you can throw your cutlasses in Pirate Yakuza to temporarily change your rush combo to the classic Thug one will absolutely remind you of the oddities from that game. Specifically, Trish's moveset with the Sparda Devil Arm. Also, as an analog to the Madness gauge giving you doppelgangers in Mad Dog, Sea Dog gives you access to different types of summons through the Dark Instruments that are gradually uncovered through side content. They're a great choice for more crowd control options, and can even help you set up more juggling opportunities in the case of something like the first Dark God you get access to. Now, granted, I can see people having more trouble with Sea Dog than with Mad Dog, if only due to the launchers here feeling less intuitive than a standard hold square type of input, and the finishers having a significantly longer animation. But investing your time in learning Sea Dog's intricacies will absolutely pay off. You have the necessary tools to close distance, the potential for creative vertical combat, and a powerful panic button to build towards if things go awry. Lastly, you'll notice how this game has more gun-wielding enemies than some of the games directly preceding it. So to prevent an infuriating experience of playing Where's Waldo in this Sea of Thieves, RGG implemented a nice indicator as to when you're at risk of being shot. Some people will likely hate this, but personally, Unless we went the DMC route of preventing enemy aggression if an opponent was off-screen, then these indicators were the only way to make this addition actually feel meaningful. And serve as a nice ramp-up to the overall challenge. Is there anything in particular that I hated about the combat? Well, my criticism in this regard more so relates to another design choice that is making its return from past entries. Much like in Gaiden, Pirate Yakuza saw it fit to necessitate dual currencies to unlock your entire moveset, as well as locking incredibly important tech behind attaining a specific pirate level through some of the side content. Much like the over-reliance on mandatory side content, this has to go. I could excuse the use of real currency and Akame points in Gaiden as a nice nod to Yakuza 0's skill acquisition, but the fact we're adding even more boundaries in Pirate Yakuza between the player and the peak of the combat system means that the vast majority of people will just have a worse experience here than in most of the main lines. Granted, players should be rewarded for exploring the game, and you shouldn't be overpowered just by doing the critical path. But while people like me, who already go for the platinum in every Yakuza game, won't be affected by these added stipulations, most other players will. Once again, if the game is fun enough, people will play it without being nudged into something, and given how diverse this community is, some people may only want to get all the upgrades and do creative combo videos with the boss encounters, meaning that forcing them to grind specific side activities for too long could lead to more complaints on this game in the future, even though an amazing experience is there. Just held back with some misplaced design choices. Thankfully, the fact we have New Game Plus available from the get-go is, once again, a way to mitigate this issue moving forward. And I highly urge everyone to replay this game once you've unlocked most of the moveset, especially if you felt like the game pulled you into too many directions during your first run. New Game Plus is Pirate Yakuza at its best, and your opinions of the game could be vastly more positive once you experience it, as was the case for games like Lost Paradise and Ishin for the community in the past. Is that juggled enemies hang in the air significantly less if you play on higher difficulty settings. So if you rely on spamming this option like in Lost Judgment,
Even though many star players, myself included,